Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our latest live video. I'm delighted to say that I'm here with Karen Amos today.
Hi, everyone.
Thanks, Karen. I'll ask Karen to introduce herself in a second, but today we're just going to discuss all about developing and supporting teams for businesses to do so, to get the best out of the people within their business, really, and help move everything forward. Now, today we are on various different social media channels. On Facebook, we're on both the Northern Affinity and on BrightBird as well. So we're on two different platforms there. We're on LinkedIn, and we're on YouTube as well. So anybody who's had any questions or I've got anything they want to add to the discussion, please, feel free to do so as we go on. I've got a few questions to speak to Karen about first, but like I said, please do contribute if and when you can. So before we go on, Karen, do you want to just introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Michael. So I'm Karen Amos. I own BrightBird Coaching and Training. Basically, what I do is I work with under pressure managers, business owners, to build really positive and productive teams. So I work on the people part of the organisation. So whilst, yes, I always work in a strategic context, that's why we're there at the end of the day in the workplace, I actually concentrate on the people part. So those soft skills that people talk about that in practice are often the hardest thing that we have to do. So it's things like giving leaders less stress, more confidence, improving communication, well-being throughout the whole business and organisation, really. So that's everything from one-to-one and teamwork coaching to training, both online and my training platform. I do some face-to-face now, but as we were discussing earlier, most of the work I now do is online. I can get the same results for people in a much more effective way.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Karen. Now, I guess the kind of first and probably the most obvious question in this area at the moment is 2020 has seen a lot of changes forced upon us, maybe more than not. So how do you think kind of what's happened this year has changed the dynamics for teams and for businesses, for individuals, the whole collective thing, really?
Well, I think really in a lot of ways, this business as usual it's been thrown out of the window, hasn't it, really? And to be honest, rightly so. I think for many people, what they've actually seen, whilst we have all the challenges, have actually been lots of opportunities as well. So with no choice, really, but to do things in a different way. So whether that's things like this, because I know in the past, this would have been an introduction to the Northern Affinity officers to the HQ. We'd have been sat perhaps across the table from each other. But, the reach we can now have to support people. But obviously the challenges are there was significant change needed, as I'm sure that people watching this will have experienced themselves in how they actually do business. But the impact and the differing impact that's had on both themselves as business owners, managers, and the people that they're supporting, really. And I think as time's gone on, there's been a real diversity of reaction to this, hasn't there? Some people have really embraced the change. Other people, I think, are still reeling to some extent.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I think everyone's kind of been going at their own pace, and it's been going on for 8 or 9 months now. But probably maybe a good place to start with all this, and I hope it's a relatively obvious question, but why is it important for people to develop the teams, the individuals, the businesses? Why does it matter?
Yeah, no, and I think that's a fair comment, really. And I think it's something that people, it becomes a side thought rather than the first thought that people should be happening. But if you think about it, for most organisations and businesses, the people part of their business, their staff, their managers, are actually the biggest investment they make financially in that business. It's certainly the biggest investment they make, usually time-wise. But then we expect things just to run and be okay. And I think in a lot of ways, we prior to the challenges that this year have brought, we're still operating in a post-war mentality, really, in lots of ways. Not everywhere, but I think lots of places have done. So, you know, there's a time really to consciously look at that rather than just ticking on and, like I said, doing this business as usual, really.
No, absolutely. And do you think it's kind of that change in mindset really about, you know, developing the people in the business? Maybe some businesses have seen their people as a burden more than anything else, where actually, you know, you have good people doing the right things. They are the key factor for driving most businesses forward.
Yeah, and it is that back to that thing about seeing people as an asset, isn't it? As you said, rather than a liability or a burden. But you know, certainly the managers that I speak to, you know, the despair, the energy drain that they get from actually working with people, you know, is palpable, really. But if you're experiencing that as a manager and a business owner, how are your staff going to perform? How are they honestly going to perform at their best if that's how you feel about it? So it's really looking at ways that, like I said, this year has really brought it to the fore, but actually really grasping the opportunities to do things differently. And I genuinely believe, and this is, I guess, the ethos behind my business, is I genuinely believe people should not go to work and have to be unhappy, that they should consistently have bad days at work. It happens. I work for myself. You know, I've probably as much, if not more, control over my working day as you do, Michael, than anybody else. We still have bad days at work. It happens. But to consistently have that, I genuinely believe that there's a better way of doing it.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's. I think just by identifying that happens is a thing. I've worked at places where you couldn't say you're having a bad day or you were struggling that day. It just didn't feel like the culture. I'm not no blame of any particular individual. It's just the culture is not right where it feels like that. And that's the big thing, isn't it? For people to say, look, I'm having a bad day. I'm struggling today. I need something, or whatever it might be. And that flexibility, which has maybe been missing previously.
Well, it has. And again, I think it takes a situation like we've had with the COVID crisis to really bring that out at the fore. And I'll be honest, you know, at the beginning of this, I was talking to some people, just really contacts, associate friends, and the difference in experience that people were having with how their employers, how their managers dealt with this situation was just really amazing. I was said to people, remember how your boss has dealt with this. And when we get to the end of it, you're not going to jump ship now. People are just grateful to have a job quite often right now. But actually, really remember how your boss behaved towards you, towards everybody else right now, because that tells you about what sort of business it is, what sort of employer it is, and how much they actually value you. I think the sad part of it is that lots of businesses and managers and employers dealt with things in a way that they could have done a lot better, but actually it was lack of knowledge, it was lack of confidence, it was lack of experience that actually there was an alternative. And like I said, that we're back. I mean, some sectors are worse than others with this, but we're back to this almost Dickensian way of working, that, you know, the manager's up at the front with a quill watching out over everybody. And those people really found it so stressful when their teams were working at home in the first lockdown in particular. And I've always said, why are you employing somebody you do not trust to do a good job? And quite often when I say that to people, it's the first time they've actually considered that as an issue.
Well, absolutely. You know, that's their fault. There's something gone wrong there with the process, if that's how they feel. Now, we've had a great question in actually from Pete, which kind of follows on from that point, really, actually, really, really well. So great to see you talk about the opportunities over the last 9 months. Do you see businesses being more empathetic towards their employees going forward? It tested me there, Pete, with empathetic. What do you think, Karen?
That word. Thanks for that, Pete. And I think it's a really good point. And again, I think there's an opportunity for people to be, and I think there's for businesses to actually see there's good business sense in doing that and really investing in their staff. And that doesn't mean just throwing more money at people, but actually opening up those channels of communication. I still think there's a danger for a lot of people. We've kind of got a light at the end of the tunnel now, and we think it's probably not another train coming. But actually, that some people are still ready to snap back to where they were. And I think some people will do that. But I think other businesses, what they've actually been able to do is test out lots of different models. So channels of communication have opened up. The word well-being is out there front and centre now, and thank God that it is really. It's about time, and not just as an add-on or a little tick box, but people are actually realising that there's something to be gained again from investing both time and money in improving the well-being and maintaining the well-being of the teams, really. So I do think there have been a lot more discussions and dialogue going on than there were beforehand. I just hope we can keep that going on, really, and going forward.
I agree completely, Karen. I mean, I'm a big believer, actually. One of the things that's going to come out of this in a bit more of the kind of medium term is that the best people, one of the things they will expect moving forward is a more flexible work life, and that's not always about time. It's various things that come into that mix, but they'll expect more flexibility, and the businesses that don't offer that are going to lose the best people. And as we said right earlier, businesses are powered by their people, and I think it's really important that people start to think about and get that right as soon as they can.
But I think there's a really good point that you made there, Michael, is about, you use the word invest. But actually, working flexibly does not necessarily cost anything. In fact, it can often be cheaper. But then you balance that and against the productivity. So it's more of, let's keep the outcomes in sight. What do we actually want to achieve here as a business? What are the outcomes? What are the outputs? I've often had a phrase when I work with people, bit flippant, but to be honest, if it isn't illegal or immoral, I don't really care how people do things to achieve what they need to do. Because to be honest, I think by throwing that out and having that flexibility with people, that they go on and work out the best way for them to do it, so long as that fits with your company culture and your way of doing things in general. Does it really matter? You've got a happier, more productive employee, and actually people who are willing to try out new ways of doing things that actually could improve the whole business or organization's productivity, not just one person's. So actually, not just that it doesn't have to be more expensive, but actually can end up saving you money.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we all know recruiting staff and things like that is one of the most expensive things that happen to businesses. So kind of just speaking a bit more generally, I guess, that with the people you work with, what are the, should we say, challenges that leaders might experience when they're trying to build a team or they're trying to support the team? Obviously you speak to people all the time in this area. What are you finding?
Well, I think a lot of the challenges that are coming out, certainly the people I'm talking about, is actually their own well-being. Because there are a lot of people out there, and there are some damn good leaders and really good managers and people who really care about their teams. But actually, people aren't so great about looking at themselves. So they'll look at the business part of things. They might see the sense, or even just ethically, around looking after the teams, but actually work themselves into the ground while they're doing it. So I think there's something about their own well-being, taking into account as well their own productivity, how the well-being can impact that, that they really need to take into account. And I think for a lot of leaders and managers, and like I said, the ones who really do give a damn about their teams, tend to put themselves last. And my view is actually we shouldn't be putting anybody last. We all have equal value, really. So employees not less than anybody, but managers not less than anybody. And there are certain places that I've seen that, to be honest, managers in particular, they've been like cannon fodder, really. Get out there and go and sort it out. And it's just not that simple, as we know. In an ideal world, people would just get on with it. But we're not robots. We are people.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's like most things in life, let's face it, it's about balance then, isn't it? So, you know, you've got people who are trying to make the best for their team, but like I said, forgetting about themselves. And actually, in the long run, that won't be the best for their team. You maybe got other people who are not trying to do the best for the team and are looking after themselves. And it's finding that balance somewhere between, which is not easy. We all know that, and we all try in all the different areas of his life. But at least trying to find that balance is a start.
Yeah. But it's trying to do the right thing, and I think people have struggled with knowing what that is. And I think, to me, this is about why I really look at people just trying to open out those communication channels. Just talk to each other, just ask the question. But people get very fearful about getting it wrong, about getting some kickback from something, and as a result, they don't do it. They hang back. And you know, in an ideal world for me, I'd just be throwing it out there. You know, people who know me, I just say things, but I say it with good heart. I say it with good intentions. You know, and I think we just need more of that, really. And I think because people are fearful of that, leaders in particular, have tiptoed around trying to do the right thing, where actually, rather than just thinking that the buck stops with them, which it does, but actually we can open that up and benefit from having that much wider conversation with our teams and the rest of our employees.
Oh, absolutely. And I guess you kind of partially answered the next question was around the kind of the issues that teams experience in terms of being able to, so obviously you talked about the leaders, but you mentioned communication, essentially what you talked about there. What other kind of problems do you tend to find that teams have getting the result that they want to get?
I mean, at the moment, and we almost feel to be in this, I think, this transition period at the moment. As we say, you know, everybody was dumped into lockdown. People didn't know what to do. We've had all the headless chicken part of it. People are more accepting that, yeah, if I need to be at home or if I need to be in work, because, you know, we have to accept there are a lot of people we're talking about here are not office-based, have to go into work. But some people don't for various reasons. So what we've now got are quite geographically dispersed teams. So that flexibility is great, but the kind of things that people are coming back to me talking about is how do we now make sure that we monitor and get the best out of the working from home productivity part of it, when actually a large amount of the staff are in the office too. So for things like me, if I'm doing online training or we're doing Zoom calls, how do you manage that when you've got some staff in the office and some staff at home? Things like that. The other thing is that, and this was something that I posted about last week, really interested in where this is taking us, but those water cooler conversations we would have had, or just that passing in the corridor, walking over to somebody's desk, can I just run this by you? Is it me? And all those kind of conversations now have a gap between them with a barrier that is either physical space or time or whatever. So it's really, how do we not lose the benefits of that? So there was an impact on that on productivity, that, yeah, people would be more likely to just have a chat between each other, and perhaps it wasn't always productive. But actually, there's something in problem solving here that we need to address that. So things that I've been talking to people about are things like team huddles. And you can do that online in the office or a mixture of both. Or if we look at agile working in its broadest sense, really, not being you know, too sort of perfectionist about what we mean with agile working, but just looking at, well, actually, what do we want to achieve? Who are the best people to do it? They go off and sort that, and they can just work between themselves and come back and touch base with other people. I think that's what we need to be looking at a lot more. But again, that's quite a big mind shift. That could have gone horribly wrong. That's quite a big mindset shift. Thank you. For lots of organisations, though, they just haven't worked that way before, and staff teams haven't worked that way before either. And there's something about how do we support and maintain the confidence of people whilst we're doing that. And there might be a little bit more hand-holding from management in order for them to be able to do that initially. But once they've got the confidence from doing it, that is such a productive way of working. Why have 12 people in a meeting when you only need 2 who are doing the critical stuff? You know, and I do say to people, you know, why are we having meetings when actually an email would suffice? I think we just need to check back in on that, really.
It's interesting you kind of talked about the water cooler discussions and things like that. I mean, I know a lot of places quite often have tried to, should we say, monitor people's activity. Obviously, you can't monitor someone having a chat over by the water cooler, but you can monitor instant messaging and various things between people. But if people are online or based remotely, surely it would be a good thing for businesses to give them their platform to have those moments. You know, there's so many platforms out there that can do this through.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe a big change in culture is actually, to an extent, encourage those conversations or social rather than discourage them.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, there's 1 or 2 people that I've spoken to who actually are using platforms like Teams, for example, really effectively. So it's not just a case of, oh, how can we have a video call, but actually, how do we manage that interaction? So I've got a client query come in, I'm not really sure. What I'd normally do is turn to the person in the desk next to me, but actually what I can do is just message them. And it might be a message that they reply to as a message, or actually they might then just pick up the phone. But it can be done. But again, I don't think that people are doing that naturally. It's almost that there feels to be people are feeling that geographical gap, really. And it's something about, again, I don't think people are doing it naturally. So as managers, you need to be talking to people about that and setting those out so people will consciously do that and say that's an expectation. And actually not seeing it as wasted time. And okay, that conversation might take 2 minutes to address as the issue you want to solve. And yeah, they might spend 5 minutes going, anyway, how are things? How are the kids? But that's back to the well-being stuff as well. People feel supported, they feel included, they feel part of it. They're going to stay around and they are going to be more productive for the rest of the working day.
And we all need to switch off a little bit during the day. I mean, I don't know about you, Karen, but I'm certainly not capable of sitting there for 8 hours and working continuously. My brain can't cope with that. So I need time, whether it's 5 minutes here and there or bigger gaps. So having a relatively social conversation can be that break for people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, there's a really good point there. And this is something else that's been coming out from both my clients and other contacts and associates, is around the pace that's significantly upped when we've moved online. And you know, I've worked this way online and been home based, because that was a deliberate, conscious choice when I set up my business. That's what I wanted to do. But actually, since everybody's been online, that people have said, I've got wall-to-wall Zoom meetings today, and actually lots of people complain as well that their eyesight is suffering because of it, because we're just not taking time away from the screen, really. So you're right, just we have to consciously build in downtime now. But that's fine, because as you say, the time that we're then on the job, we are really productive. If we've got staff who are nailing it and their outcomes are there at the end of the day, again, what does it really matter? How they've been spending that day? They've done what they needed to do, what they normally would have been on a working day when they've met our expectations.
Oh, absolutely. Now we've talked about kind of managers and leaders a few times, kind of as this discussion. What you hear a lot about kind of essentially leadership styles or the ways of leading people. What is the right way, or is there a right way?
Well, yeah, it's an interesting one, really, and you know, I've been a manager for a number of years, you know, before I set up my business. And it's an area that I've always been really interested in, but lots of the management and leadership models, they're post-war models. And I think that's really interesting. That I'm not saying they don't have any validity, but we work in such a different environment now. Again, we don't have boss who goes into the office, who has subordinates, who tells what to do, and they go away and do that, might grumble between themselves, but go off and do it, because if they don't, they get fired and they're out of the door because they don't have any protections. Or, you know, as we know, we live in such a different world now, and thank goodness for that, really. So I think whilst all those models are there and they do still have some validity to make sense of our world, they don't encapsulate the leader as a person. And what I encountered a lot with my clients were that I'd be doing executive one-to-one coaching, leadership coaching, and frequently they'd be saying to me, do you know, my kids wouldn't recognise me at home. I'm not like this at home, you know. Wow, mate, no wonder you're stressed. You're spending at least 8-10 hours a day, sometimes more, being a person that you don't even like. You know, people talked about going to work, putting on a suit of armour. And I felt like that in the past. I don't know if you have. I mean, most people that I speak to have been in a management position, have experienced that at some point. And I just think there's a different way, really. And from my point of view, I found authentic leadership as an approach. And that's something that I advocate now. And it's almost, to me, it underpins all the other management theories, because what it talks about is you as the leader, you as a person who is a leader. You're not putting on a persona, you're not playing a role, you're not saying, you know, we've got things like situational leadership, which is a brilliant leadership model of what leadership approach and style we take in certain situations, but you're still you at the bottom of you. So if you've got a staff team and one day you're being like this and quite authoritarian, the next day you're being very democratic, the next time that you're taking much more of a coaching style to people really don't know where they stand with you if they don't understand you as a leader. So what I tend to work with really is to try and help managers and leaders sort of take off that suit of armour. And it's scary, but to be able to put themselves out there. I wish I'd have known about this 20 odd years ago.
It's a really interesting idea, because again, the word I keep thinking of when you were talking then is trust. Yeah. And I think if you're trying to be something you are not, yeah, whether they'll know either consciously or subconsciously, there'll be something going around their mind. Something just doesn't feel right. Yeah. And I relate it back to kind of working in sales a lot, that this idea of you have to be a certain person to work in sales. And I've seen it, loads of people do it. They're two completely different people in work and out. Yeah. And that people have a mistrust for salespeople anyway. So if you're like that, it makes it worse. And I think it's just the same, really, same kind of concept as a leader. You can't, it's impossible to be somebody else 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's impossible.
Yeah. And why would you be? You know, because are we actually saying the person that you are is either not good enough or too vulnerable? So if you're going into a place that you actually feel too vulnerable to be yourself, you have not created a safe working space that will encourage well-being and productivity. You know, and we've all had those managers and leaders we will follow to the ends of the earth. And thinking about what is it about them. And quite often it is what you've said, that you trust them, you know what they stand for, you know what to expect from them. And it's not that you know, it's almost like with your school teachers, isn't it, when you think back to school, and they're not necessarily the school teachers or the managers who were the easiest going about things. It would be pretty tough about things, but you knew where you stood with them. You knew what was expected of you, and you knew actually if the going got tough, they got you back. That they were there for you, and they would look out for you, and they cared enough about you, really. And I genuinely don't believe that is a fluffy bunny approach. And I say this to lots of people I work with. You know, it's actually the opposite of fluffy bunny. It's actually the hardest thing you will ever do as a manager and a leader, is put yourself out there. That you've made a mistake or made the wrong call, hold your hand up and say, yeah, sorry, I got that wrong. What are we going to do about this now? What do you think we should do about it? And you're actually doing not I, but we there, and taking that risk and perhaps taking collective decisions to put forward a way of working that you might not naturally choose to do.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant place to finish. Actually, Karen, I think that's a fantastic point. Just before, obviously, if anyone wants to find out a bit more about who you are, what you do, what's kind of the best places to check you out?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. So I have a website, which is www.bright-bird.co.uk. I also regularly post on LinkedIn. That's either as Karen Amos or with my company page as BrightBird, and on Facebook and Twitter. So lots of hints and tips around coaching, leadership, well-being at work. Yeah, real broad. So give me a follow, get in touch.
Brilliant, Karen. As I always say, if anyone can't find Karen for whatever reason, contact us. Obviously, we have all Karen's details. So, yes, thank you for that, Karen, and thank you for everyone watching. Some really, really helpful and useful information there, Karen. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks, Mike.